So, Kim, we keep hearing about how broad presidential pardons are. So the obvious question is, could Joe Biden do this?
The question is always, if he did it, what's the consequence? Less so what's actually in the Constitution, which is not much about pardons. And I don't think there would necessarily be any accountability for something like that unless Donald Trump later were to prosecute these folks anyway. They would raise this broad pardon as a defense. And then in that instance, it would go to the United States Supreme Court. But of course, Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford without any indictment actually pending against Richard Nixon. I think that set historical precedent for the notion that pardons before indictment, after the conduct has happened, before indictment, have been de facto accepted under American law, even though the Supreme Court's never addressed that specific issue.
So, Eddie, the argument for people who think that this might not be a bad idea is listen to what he's telling you, meaning Donald Trump. NPR did a count. During the 2024 campaign, they found that Donald Trump, quote, made more than 100 threats to investigate, prosecute, imprison, or otherwise punish his perceived enemies, including political opponents and private citizens. Is there any reason not to take him at his word?
No, I mean, we need to understand him to be as direct and as honest as he says as he has been. Trump has proven over and over again, Chris, that he's a man of his word. And I put that in inverted commas because he's so prone to tell untruths. And so people have a right, I think, to be absolutely concerned. But the implications for a kind of blanket pardon in this sense is, as you rightly noted in the lead, a kind of escalation. And we would have to ask the question, what would it mean for presidential pardoning power post such an escalation, right? And I think we need to be clear as well that if he's willing to target folk in the way that he says he's going to do, he's going to target them anyway, even if there is a kind of blanket pardoning. And then we'll have the issue at the Supreme Court, as the previous guest said.
So when we talk about what would it mean post-escalation, there obviously are two questions. One's political and one is legal. So let me ask you, Matthew, the political ones. It's not like Joe Biden's running again. So in that sense, there are no political implications. Some Democrats will tell you they think that they are going to pay a price, that they have lost the argument to say we have to hold to a higher standard. But what do you think about this?
Well, first, happy holidays to you, Chris, and to Eddie and Kim. I hope it's great for you all and peaceful and restful in all of this as we discuss these harrowing situation. I mean, I have three reasons why I think this is a big mistake. One of which I guess is political. Maybe the second is political, too. First is Joe Biden made a commitment before Election Day. When all of this was said, this was all said before Election Day. Donald Trump said it. Kash Patel said it. All these folks said this before Election Day. And Joe Biden made a commitment. He wasn't going to pardon his son. And by extension, he wasn't going to be giving blanket pardons to other people in this. So first, he went back on what he said prior to Election Day, even though we all knew if Joe Biden was planning on doing this, in my view, he should have said this before Election Day when all this was getting started. He said, I don't trust this guy. And if he gets elected, I'm going to take care of business and protect these people. That's one problem. So there's a level of, in my view, dishonesty or shadiness in this. The second is people that confront autocracies and people that confront this situation, part of the power of that is to struggle through it, as the civil rights leaders fought, many who ended up in jail, many of who were arrested, many of who were done that all wrongly, all in acts of injustice. But by virtue of the fact they went through the system, it gave power to the movement. And I think when you do these blanket pardons, it takes power away from the movement. The other part of that is all of the people they're talking about giving pardons to are all people with means financially and all people who are mostly prominent in the public eye, who have much greater power. What about the other hundreds and thousands of Americans that Donald Trump might go after that don't have financial means, that don't have the capacity to get in the public eye, that he could easily harass and hassle? So to me, it's a brand of elitism. And the third thing, which I think is the most powerful thing politically in this, is it takes the moral high ground by doing this, in my view. It takes the moral high ground in the fight for democracy and by extension, the rule of law, away from the Democrats, or dilutes it badly in this. For all the statements that have been made about we need to establish the rule of law, the executive power has too much, the executive branch has too much power, and Donald Trump's going to use it to establish an autocracy. When Joe Biden walks out the door, he's going to exercise executive power in an unheard of way, in a way that sounds a lot like what Donald Trump would do or say. And I think it fractures the pro-democracy movement. It fractures it seriously. And I think it sort of dilutes the moral high ground that you would have if you didn't do this. So for those three reasons, I think it's a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of folks, they agree with you, probably on 1, 2, and 3. But let me go back to you, Kim, because if we're going to look at what the post-presidential landscape looks like after Joe Biden has left office and what this might mean going forward, I mean, what does it mean if there really are big threats? Will we have the ability to protect people against them? What are the implications of taking this to that kind of level?
Well, I think the immunity decision over the summer, when the Supreme Court injected immunity for presidents into the Constitution when it's not there, and in fact, it's suggested in the impeachment clause the alternative, right? The Supreme Court literally amended the Constitution to put the president above the law, able to use executive power to commit crimes. I mean, in this moment, that means manufacturing or destroying evidence. If Donald Trump were to decide to do that, there would be no accountability, right? The law is only about incentives and disincentives. That's why we have laws. What's the disincentive for Donald Trump, given everything he said and what he did the last time and the multiple crimes he's committed and that he's gotten away with, to use the full power of law enforcement against his critics? That is a new day for the Justice Department. I think we're heading into a completely revised view of democracy because we don't have any meaningful guardrails and pushbacks. And I see this as Joe Biden coming late in the game. I think some more aggressive things could have been done in the last few years by Democrats, both in the White House and in the United States Congress, to push back vigorously on the degradation of the rule of law and the Constitution and democracy. And if in this moment he's able to save the trauma, the country, some trauma of some political retributions in the waning days of his office, to me, I don't see that as having later a boomerang effect, because we're already there. We're already there with this man who's been elected, with his promises, with who he's putting in office, and with the Supreme Court green-lighting the use of the scary power, the official power, to commit crimes with impunity.
I want to play to that point, and I'll connect the points, Eddie. Something that Democratic Senator Ed Markey signaled, and he basically said Biden should wait until the last possible minute to make a decision on this. Here's what he said.
If it's clear by January 19th that that is his intention, then I would recommend to President Biden that he provide those preemptive pardons to people, because that's really what our country's going to need next year.
The fact that we're even having this conversation, Eddie, and as Kim pointed out, we're talking about a revised view of democracy. What does it say about this moment we're in?
Wow, Chris, we're in a moment of crisis, right? I mean, we're standing on the precipice in so many ways. And, you know, in a sense, I agree with both Matt and with Senator Markey, right? I think Sister Kim, if you mind if I call you Kim, has kind of given us a nice framework. But it seems to me that we need to create the conditions under which the Supreme Court will have to address this question. And so if Donald Trump decides to go ahead and pursue a conviction or a criminal indictment of these folk after the blanket pardon has been issued, then we need to push it and see where we're going to land. And I want to say this about Matt's point, too, the third point about ceding the moral high ground. Oftentimes when we're dealing with bad actors, Matt, they presume that we will be constrained by our commitments to norms. They presume that we're going to be constrained by home training, by our commitments to certain kind of moral norms. That allows them free rein to act any way they can, any way they want to. And so the moment we fight back, and I'm not saying we should in this instance, but the moment we fight back, they clutch their pearls and claim that you're just like us. And if we don't fight back, they just run roughshod. So it's a kind of catch-22, and we need to understand that for what it is as we try to devise strategies to respond to what we're about to experience.